Pay close attention. What you're about to see is Bible prophecy being fulfilled.
Welcome to another edition of YPN News, bringing you the news that relates to Bible prophecy and foretold by Yeshua Hawkins. Well, Katan, in the news, we see food prices rising, gas prices rising, but we have something that's shrinking, and that's the lakes. Specifically, Utah's Great Salt Lake. We'll talk about that. But first, we're going to talk about thousands of migrants coming from southern Mexico have one goal in mind, and that is to reach the United States. Now, one young man told Al Jazeera News his reasoning, saying, quote, "I left my country in search of a better future. With God's help, if He permits, I will reach the U.S. border and find new opportunities and help my family."
Well, many of the weary travelers are from Venezuela and have been walking for a long time through the unforgiving heat and even in the rain. It is the largest migrant caravan to head to the U.S. border so far this year. But such a large group cannot make this difficult trek without stopping to rest frequently. Even though they are a tired group, they are committed to continuing on. Their lives as well as that of their families are at stake. And I can imagine the drive that's pushing them towards the U.S.
Well, let's talk about food prices for a few minutes. $10 to $12 for a head of lettuce. Well, you heard me correctly. Wow. In Australia, the price for one head of lettuce is now $12, and that is just the beginning. Now, grocery chains there are running into supply problems, and they say that potatoes and onions will be the next to increase. A lot of produce is following suit, from peppers to beans to berries. So quite a few of the staples right there that are now going up in price.
That's right, and it wasn't that long ago when you can get a head of lettuce for literally just pennies, less than $1 per head. Well, well-known restaurant chains such as Subway and KFC have made the announcement that they will be mixing cabbage with their lettuce to fill sandwiches. Now, this is largely due to heavy flooding in Queensland, which pretty much has wiped out the majority of their lettuce crops this year. Well, besides natural disasters, price hikes on fertilizers and other chemicals farmers use to grow their produce has increased, and they have to, of course, pass on these costs to those who buy their produce so they can make ends meet.
Oh, but fruits and vegetables are not the only items going up in price. There are reports that the $1 coffee from 7-Eleven could go up to as much as $2.50. And according to the grocery app Frugal, prices have risen across the board on grocery items such as instant coffee, which is up 47%. Imported olive oil also up between 30 and 50%. Oats have risen to 70 to 30%. Pasta, tomato soup, and potatoes have all gone up 18 to 23%. And white bread is now going to cost the consumers 4 to 10% more than in the recent past.
Oh, wow. Well, while there's not a whole lot the average person can do, consumers are being encouraged to shop at their local markets who can provide them with specials on some items, since smaller stores have different supply chains than their larger counterparts. But it is not likely this trend in rising prices will go away anytime soon.
Well, prices keep going up everywhere, and our field correspondent Larry McGee is talking about the gas prices and the pain that some of the travelers are experiencing at the pump. Right. Larry, what do you have for us?
The consequences of war are multiple and many, as evidenced by the steep incline of gas prices, which can be attributed, at least in part, to the current conflict between Russia and the West. America is attempting to pressure Moscow into compliance by preventing them from buying and selling, and this has produced an escalation in the amount for which gas is sold, which has also caused an increase in uproar among the people having to buy it. There are additional fears related to the upcoming hurricane season, which has the potential in its damage to reduce America's domestic capacities to refine oil, and that would drive prices up yet even further. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen testified to the Senate that there's basically no way the country can shield itself from these kinds of shocks given the circumstances of the Ukrainian war. The outlook of analysts is that prices at the pump will remain high for at least the remainder of this year, to be alleviated only by another wave of the plague or a recession. For YPN News, I'm Larry McGee. Katan Jeff, back to you.
Well, you know, that's something to consider with forecasters already predicting a pretty active hurricane season, which we know that affects the refineries. That drives fuel costs, fuel prices up as well. But, you know, outside of people traveling for the holidays, you have to take into consideration the millions of people that rely on those fuel prices to stay fairly moderate so that they can go back and forth to work to support their families.
Absolutely.
Well, let's move over a little bit to Utah. Salt Lake City, Utah. In fact, their Great Salt Lake has shrunken to a third of its original size due to the ongoing extreme drought conditions across the United States. As it continues to shrink, heavy metals like arsenic are being exposed to the air as the water continues to evaporate. Well, biology professor Bonnie Baxter with Westminster College, in an interview with CBS News, said that one of the main driving forces is water diversion from the increased population and for continued development, as well as agriculture use.
Well, she continued, quote, that expansion and development has occurred over the last century, and because we have not set ourselves up for success, coupled with rising temperatures and less snowpack, the lake is no longer able to rebound, end quote. Now, along with arsenic, there's also selenium and methylated mercury in the lake bed due to years of mining practices led to these heavy metals ending up in the Great Salt Lake.
Well, also due to the increased population of Utah and the proximity of people to the lake, breathing the lake bed dust could be unhealthy for many in the area if this trend continues. But Professor Baxter said that migratory birds and smaller organisms that shrimp feed on, and many other species, not just the human species, could suffer, resulting in an ecosystem collapse. So she said the brine shrimp industry, the mineral extraction industry, jobs, human health, and of course, an ecosystem. Those are things that are all at stake with just this one body of water shrinking. Right.
It doesn't take a lot to get the balance, that perfection there, and the balance to get it off. If, you know, one thing like the water starts going way too low, it affects a lot of other things.
That's right.
Well, do you like a great meal after a long day's work? You've probably noticed food shortages at your local grocery stores, coupled with rising prices. Well, if you love food and want to ensure you have it for your family in the near future, it is best if you start buying it now. Take a look at this video to see what was once just a script in an apocalyptic movie, now becoming an all-too-present reality.
If your pantry is starting to look empty and there are things you need to stock up on, you should probably rush to the stores right now and do it right away. Grocery shortages and bare shelves are back with a vengeance, and farmers, industry executives, and even government agencies are warning us that they're only going to get worse in the weeks and months ahead. And if you thought you've been spending way too much on everyday essentials lately, well, get ready to spend even more, because everything is getting far more expensive. As our food production collapses and more farmers abandon their crops due to rising costs, grocery prices are set to reach sky highs this summer, and U.S. consumers will be left scrambling with widespread shortages for the second consecutive year. We have a lot to discuss in today's video, but before sharing some unsettling facts and forecasts with you, please support us by leaving a thumbs up and subscribing to our channel to stay up to date with the most important news. If you walked through a grocery store recently, you probably have seen by yourself that empty shelves are starting to multiply. Over the past year, U.S. households have faced localized shortages of certain products and brands, while they also dealt with soaring grocery bills and dramatically higher living expenses. Americans are paying more for everything, from electronics to housing to food, and even more worryingly, fuel. The relentless rise in gas and diesel prices is also having a major impact on U.S. farmers, who are losing motivation to plant anything and to take care of their crops due to a massive increase in commodity prices, a massive increase in raw materials, and a massive increase in fertilizers. According to Iowa farmer Ben Reach, the challenges he and his fellow agricultural producers are facing will soon result in unprecedented grocery bills for millions of U.S. consumers. Reach is the owner of Blue Diamond Farming Company in Iowa, and in a recent interview he alerted the public that the inflation we're seeing at the supermarket right now is nowhere near as bad as it will get as the growing season continues in the heartland. He said, "If you think we're seeing food prices spike right now, I think the food price increases are just starting. And I don't think your grocery bill will be $1,000 a month. I think it may go up $1,000 a month." He explained that higher fuel, fertilizer, and raw material costs are crushing farmers' profits and thereby decreasing demand for agriculture inputs, which translates to spreading out crops during the planting phase, resulting in a smaller harvest. "My diesel price is up, so that's crushing my profit and my fertilizer prices for phosphorus, nitrogen, and potassium, the three key nutrients I need to grow. My crops are up 3 times, he said, adding that his latest fertilizer bill alone was over $1 million. On a similar note, John Boyd Jr., the president of the National Black Farmers Association, noted that these drastic price increases are absolutely crushing small farmers, and warned that this has pushed the American food supply chain to a devastating crisis that will be reflected on grocery store shelves and wallets by the summer. Boyd Jr. highlights that millions of small agricultural producers, who actually account for nearly 40% of the country's food production, are abandoning their crops simply because they cannot afford to pay higher prices for fuel or for fertilizers. "We're gonna see a lot of empty shelves and a lot higher prices," he said. That's also what the brothers who own Donaldson Farms in New Jersey warned last week. They argued that those who are paying the higher prices will likely pass them on to their customers or risk facing bankruptcy. Greg, Gary, and David Donaldson exposed that American farmers have been already financially burdened by rising labor costs and energy prices, and the new price increases came on top of a series of other price increases that have been making farming an unprofitable business. The latest spike in diesel prices is particularly worrying, given that fuel is the lifeblood of the American farmer, they said. Until fuel prices normalize, and hopefully that will be as soon as possible, food and other everyday essentials will be harder to get and prices will continue to climb. That's a prospect that has alarmed even the USDA, leading the agency to issue a report suggesting that food inflation is threatening to spiral out of control as several factors weighing on the U.S. food supply chain are compounding to send prices to levels not seen since even the end of the Carter presidency. Bird flu outbreaks are driving up egg and poultry meat prices far faster than usual, with eggs expected to cost 20% more and poultry 9% more this year than their 2021 averages, the Agriculture Department reported. USDA economists raised their forecasts of food inflation for the 4th month in a row to the highest rate since 1980. An ongoing outbreak of highly pathogenic avian influenza has reduced the U.S. egg layer flock and drove a 10.3% increase in retail egg prices in April, The Economist wrote on the USDA's monthly food price outlook. retail poultry prices have been high, with historically low stocks of frozen chicken, also called cold storage. The ongoing highly pathogenic avian influenza outbreak has also contributed to increasing poultry prices, as over 38 million birds have been affected. The agency predicts that food and grocery inflation is going to rise another 7 to 7.5%, totaling the biggest annual increase since the last year of the Carter era. Needless to say, Americans will be totally gutted by another wave of grocery price hikes. According to a Morning Consult survey, 71% of U.S. households are already struggling to keep up with rising grocery prices. 41% reported they will change their prospective purchasing habits if prices soar higher, and 51% revealed they're already noticing empty shelves at their local supermarkets. The high degree of supply pressure on categories that account for such a large share of spending helps to explain rising concern over the elevated cost of living. Grocery items stood out as having both the most severe impact from shortages in March 2022 and the biggest jump since September 2021, noted Morning Consult in its report. So, if you know that you're going to need something in the months ahead, we advise you to buy it now. We advise you to buy it now. We advise you to buy it now, because with the way things are going, there is a very high chance that you will be paying a whole lot more if you wait. In a very informative op-ed published on The Nation, Liet Olenek shed a light on the many causes contributing to this alarming situation. She says Americans have very little understanding of where most of our food actually comes from. She highlights that makes it harder to connect the dots between extreme heat, drought, the insect apocalypse, and our food system. But without dramatic action to limit both warming and corporate power over our food supply, food shortages and famines are imminent. To put it simply, the plants we eat and the animals that eat plants require water, a predictable climate, and beneficial insects like pollinators to grow. Climate change is ruining all that, while also creating the conditions for agricultural disaster, fires, floods, heat waves, freezes, and new diseases that could wipe out entire cultivars of staple food plants. Extreme heat and drought are already decreasing the yields of American soy, corn, and wheat crops, she explains. In her view, the formula crisis millions of parents are facing right now is a preview of what's coming next for the entire country. The corporate consolidation that precipitated the formula shortage is also a feature of our agricultural system and already makes food more expensive. And with an increasingly oligarchic government, the prospect of frequent food and water shortages becomes even more dire, she argues. Even South Dakota Governor Kristi Noem is sounding the alarm about the corporate control over our food supplies. She stressed, to keep our food supply consistent and affordable for all families, it is essential that no one else controls it. But for years now, foreign corporations have been investing in our food supply chain, buying up the chemical and fertilizer companies that make American agriculture possible. Purchasing processing facilities, they've introduced vulnerability into the food supply chains that Americans rely on to eat. On the other hand, our local farmers are not receiving the help they need from our leaders. They're being left with a huge financial burden, taking on more and more debt and putting their business at risk. Americans deserve to have their leaders treat disruptions in our food system with concern, Noem emphasizes. America is much closer to the possibility of widespread food shortages than we think. Food security is our next crisis, and it may already be here, she warned. Unfortunately, this is just the beginning. The federal government will continue to support big corporations and allow millions of U.S. farmers to lose their crops and face bankruptcy. Things are getting crazier and crazier in our domestic supply chains, and the inflationary nightmare we have been into over the past few years won't be over anytime soon. We should start bracing for more disruptions, extensive shortages, skyrocketing prices, and some more unpleasant surprises coming our way during the second half of this year. So go to the stores and stock up while you still can, because things will soon get much more chaotic.
You know, the old saying, you don't miss the water until the well runs dry. Well, we're starting to see the supply of food running dry, and you know, it seems like there's going to be a big scramble for people to buy as much as they possibly can, which is going to put an even greater strain on the food supply, which they're having a hard time keeping up with already.
Right, and I remember Yishra Hawkins talking about how all of this could take place very quickly, like almost overnight. If certain things, you know, are set in place, that it could all collapse very quickly, and it's really seeing like it's all building up to that point.
Yeah, and so far as speculators and forecasters can see, nothing is trending downward. Everything is going up and the prices are increasing. Well, if you would like to increase not the cost or the burden on your wallet, but increase your storehouse of knowledge, contact the House of Yahweh. And when you do, don't forget to request your free copy of the Prophetic Word magazine and the monthly newsletter. Here's how.
To contact the House of Yahweh, you can write them at the House of Yahweh, P.O. Box 2498, Abilene, Texas, 79604. You can call them at 1-800-613-9494. Visit them on any of their websites by going to yahweh.com, yishrahawkins.com, or yahwehsbranch.com. You can also visit our website by going to ypnnews.com. If you'd like to email the House of Yahweh, you can do so by emailing info@yahweh.com. For any international calls, you can call the number that's on your screen now. And once again, don't forget to check out the Yisrael Says program by going to yisraelsays.com and the Ask Yisrael program by going to askyisrael.com. These programs are absolutely free, and with everything going up in cost, this is going to remain the same. It's completely free and loaded with information that will benefit you and your family for weeks, months, and years to come.
Well, don't go anywhere, because up next is another very informative and inspiring sermon from Yisrael Hawkins. From all of us here at YPN News, I'm Katan Alexander.
And I'm Jeffrey Heimerman.
Thank you for watching.